Hey everyone, how you doing? This is Amon Green, Gourmet Packers all-time leading rusher, and you're watching Packers Total Access Live, your daily source for Packer content. Go Pack, go!
What's up, guys? Welcome into Packers Total Access. My name is Clayton. You can check us out on packernet.com. Find me on Twitter at Packers_access. We are flying solo as of the moment. Tim may be joining us shortly. Obviously live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and Rumble. Appreciate everybody in the chat already filing in. I see Mr. Larry in here. Good to see you, Larry. Hopefully you're doing well. Everybody hit that like button on the way in. Feel free to sub to the channel if you're new here. We do Packers daily content for the most part. We try to talk about things that actually matter and not our favorite food takes, although when we got a full house, it gets off the rails from time to time. So hopefully everybody's having an awesome weekend here on this glorious June the 21st. We got a bunch of stuff to get into. We're going to get into the Patreon questions. We're going to talk a little ed policy. We're also going to hit a little Carrington Valentine chalk talk. So excited about that as well. And again, guys, in the chat, if you would hit that like button, appreciate everybody swinging through. I see Daryl in there, Mr. Larry, Clint, everybody filing in. Thank y'all so much. What's up, Bates? Good to see you, buddy. Everybody, hopefully, like I said, y'all are having an awesome evening. Want to do this to kind of kick things off and play a quick clip that came in from my Autism Connection. You guys know we have got the giveaway coming up here in early July. It's going to run all the way through the month of June for you to have an opportunity to donate to a good cause and obviously give yourself a chance to win an awesome piece of Packers memorabilia. And the way you do that is you go over to my Twitter account at Packers_access. You'll see a tweet pinned at the top of the page. Just click on the link there, givebutter.com/KRPSJ5. And for every $5 you donate, you'll be entered into the contest once. So, if you donate, $50 will get you 10 entries into the giveaway. We're going to be putting everybody's name on the wheel, spinning it, and giving away an autographed Dorsey Levens jersey. Really, really cool piece of Packers memorabilia there. And again, that is my Autism Connection, building hope, community, and independence for autistic adults. Now, Miss Mary sent this video over of the gang, just sending out a thank you video. It's a couple minutes long. I thought this was really cool. Let's check it out.
Is currently running a fantastic giveaway, did you say? Yeah. To benefit my Autism Connection or Set Back, for every $5, your name will be entered into a drawing for a Dorsey Levens jersey. And as you guys can tell, Dorsey Levens is sitting over there in the bag. You guys can look at it if you guys want. They've already raised over $405, and there's going to be more donated. This is not all. PTA shared, we are just that they can help us raise a little funding for what you are doing. Really cool. We appreciate their support. The connection with PTA happened at the NFL draft, and I am wearing the NFL draft shirt because this is the shirt I bought when I first met PTA. I was there with my friend Cassie and recognized Clayton, the owner, PTA's owner, as it says. He heard me say his name, and his wife pointed us out. And they also wanted to let you know that they say hi. Clayton also did give me this PTA bracelet. I'll let you take it.
So they have been putting a post up the screen. We appreciate them for that. So you see things like we appreciate you guys for doing the giveaway for Mac, PTA, and also Mac appreciates.
Mac appreciates your support.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, we figure something. So
just read it off if you want.
Well, yeah. That's it.
No, read it.
Finally, Clayton, thank you so much for your support.
Yeah. I don't think so. But he also said go Pack Go.
Yeah.
I don't think he said go.
Oh, yeah. Finally, hey Clayton, thank you so much for your support. Go Pack Go.
Woo!
Yeah. We appreciate
Nice.
it.
Thank you, PTA.
Thank you, PTA.
Woo!
Awesome. So again, thank you, Mary, for taking the time to put that video together. And it's our pleasure to be able to partner up and just raise a little awareness and raise a little money for a good cause. So it was an absolute honor getting to meet her at the draft and some of her close friends. Just a really, really cool experience, man. This Packers team, I think what I love the most about sports in general is when you get past the toxic folks, you meet some really, really good people. There's some people that take sports just a little too serious. And people probably hearing my voice right now going, hey, that's you, Clayton. And it could be the case for the most part. But I love it when an event brings just a ton of people together, if you know what I mean. Like, I just think it's awesome, like going to a UT football game from time to time and seeing 100,000 people come together for a sporting event. And for the most part, everybody getting along is just absolutely awesome. It's just something that everybody is passionate about and come together and have a good time. And then when you meet individuals and start to develop a friendship with them, I don't know, man. I don't want to get too heavy. It's a cool thing. I think it's a God thing, personally. I just think it's absolutely awesome. So, again, I want to thank everybody who's already donated to that cause. And again, just go to my Twitter account at Packers_access if you'd like to donate to my Autism Connection and obviously give yourself a chance to win that autographed Dorsey Levens jersey. Again, Mary, thank you so much for that video. All right, let's get into the Patreon questions that have been coming in here over on our Patreon group. And you guys know it's the best way to support us here at PTA is to join our Patreon community, patreon.com/PackerFan Total Access. You get access to questions for the show. It's also kind of a comment forum as well. It more or less works like a super chat. So with that being said, we're going to come back to the Chris N one because that's going to tie in with the Ed policy talk. But Papa Smurf in the house says, you will be able to tell that I'm getting a little age on me. Ain't we all, Papa Smurf? The first Packer game I remember was the 1961 championship game, a 37-0 win over the Giants. The next 5 years were amazing. My question is, was there any kind of salary cap back then? Seemed like we kept all of our good players and only added 2 or 3 new guys per year. So, yeah, Papa Smurf, the salary cap didn't come along until like 1991 or 92. As a matter of fact, Reggie White was the first big free agent signing. And as a matter of fact, I don't know if there was actually a salary cap then. Somebody check that for me in the chat. Throw up what year did the salary cap actually begin? But free agency began there in the early 90s. So if you go back to 1961, typically what happened, Papa Smurf, was if you drafted someone, you had their rights and there's nothing they could really do about it. Now, obviously, they could disagree with the pay and just not play, but they couldn't go test the market. They couldn't go shop their talents around the league. So it was like once a player was drafted, unless that team just wanted to cut ties with them, then, hey, you're there. That's the way that worked. Bates, thank you so much. 1994 was, and looks like Ben Holden got it as well. Thank you, guys. 1994 was when the salary cap was first implemented. And I'm sure that was after free agency hit and everybody went, the owners were like, hey, look, we got to cap this spending somehow, some way, right? But again, back then, Papa Smurf, players just played for the same team unless they were traded or released, and there was really nothing they could do about it. I don't remember the specific player, but there was a story one time that was told that a player came into Vince Lombardi's office and demanded a new contract. And I don't want to misquote and say the wrong name, so I'm not going to take a guess here. But he basically came in and said, hey, I'm worth more. I want more money. And Vince said, okay. He said, I'll be right back. And he walked out of the room. And then he came back in the room and said, you just been traded to X team. It was just like, we're not going to negotiate. That's just the way it goes, right? And I remember when the Gold Dust twins were drafted, I'm trying to think, it was Donnie Anderson, and who was the other one? Help me out, chat. There was another running back. They drafted 2 running backs fairly high, and they had their signing bonus, Tim, was just through the freaking roof. It was Donnie Anderson, and there was another guy, Jim Grabowski, I think it was, if I remember correctly. And they were getting paid a lot more money than Jim Taylor. And Jim Taylor was pissed. That was kind of the beginning of the end, the fallout between Jim Taylor and Vince Lombardi. And obviously Jim Taylor would go back to the state of Louisiana and play for the New Orleans Saints, which was kind of his home state, if I understood correctly. But yeah, that was an interesting time, Tim, and how things changed, man. I will say this is the NFL is flawed. Don't get me wrong. It's not perfect. There's no perfect business model, I don't think. But boy, oh boy, do they got this thing cooking from a revenue standpoint, man.
Oh, yeah. I mean, at least the players don't have to get a job in the offseason now, right? I mean,
right. Exactly, man. Wild how times were back then, for sure. Andy Monday in the chat says, trying to bring up a worthy topic in the dead period can be tough, gents, but I want to keep looking for future highlights of our team. So could you, using stats or PFF grades or film, examples of all 3 would be really great. Discuss some encouraging players, trends from last season that you believe we will see in 2025? For example, you guys and Ryan have done an awesome job of fighting back against the quote, "We have no pass rush" crowd of ignoramuses. He uses such big words, man. Andy's so much more educated than me. Using pressure percentages from the second half of the season. Could you find other players on offense and defense who trended well over the second half or last 4 games? As I mentioned, use stats or PFF or film to make your case. Thanks, fellas. Go Pack, go. It'll take some time to put that together, Andy. I'm trying to think. One that comes to mind for me was the secondary. And I don't have any specific stats to back it up right now. I remember specifically there was a game, Tim, where Carrington Valentine, and I know we've been talking a lot about Carrington because he's going to be taking Jai's place. That's the reality of the situation.
Yep.
But there was a game, and a matter of fact, I want to give a shout out to somebody on X at Wayne. Here's a bunch of numbers: 1170559510. Hopefully that's not your social there, Wayne. Got to be a little more strategic on that. But he said watching the secondary get torched last year gave many PTSD. But then he shows the at PFF_Packers Carrington Valentine among cornerbacks in Week 15. His coverage grade in Week 15, Tim, Carrington Valentine, a 90.4. He was only 1 first down allowed. He had an interception. He also forced an incompletion, and his passer rating allowed was 58.3. So that's the thing. As I was reading Andy Monday's question there, and again, he wants a little bit deeper dive, and maybe we'll find time to do that. I would love to do that, and I think it's a great idea. The first person that came to mind for me was how Carrington played down the stretch, because I thought he played really, really well and kind of stepped into that role once Jai was out for the rest of the season. Does anything come to mind for you there, Tim?
Yeah, you stole my thunder. That was CV was the first thing that came to mind when you're talking about trending upwards towards the end of last year, going into this season. Mm-hmm. Obviously not doing a super deep dive, but yeah, I thought of CV right away. And, we were looking for him to just not be a liability, right? And I think he ended up being, above and beyond expectations, especially down the stretch. And then, of course, Edge Coop, you got to think about Edge Cooper and the year he had after, kind of missing some time early on and not really getting, he was probably, I would think 2 to 3 games shy of where he should have been, right, Clay? Like we were talking about, like he should have saw the field probably a little bit sooner than he did, but
yeah,
case in point, he really closed out the year strong, I think, and he's certainly on the right path going into his second season. So those would be the first 2 names I think of.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I really do. I was trying to think. There was something else that I had in mind there as well, and I've already lost it. And Holmes MD1 says top 5 coverage unit last season, shaking my head. And that tweet, I believe he was trying to refer to the last season, meaning 2023, where they struggled, right? And then, of course, they stepped up big time, made some say top 5. I would say top 10 pass defense. But I know the other thing, Tim. That comes to mind is the run defense and how they got to that point. And we're going to talk about that on the backside of this show with Carrington Valentine Chalk Talk. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to show you guys all of his run stops, like it's just called a stop because there's some passing plays in there as well. And it's basically when a player makes a tackle on a play that's deemed negative in EPA, right? Like a negative play for the offense. Who stopped that play? Who made it happen? That's essentially what the stops are. And we kind of talked about that a little bit last night. But with the run defense, for me, we fought like hell to keep the Wolves at bay last year.
Yeah.
Because it's like, boys, I know you're upset about the pass rush. And like Andy pointed out, that Ryan pointed out on a great podcast he did there in the second half of the season, pass rush really turned on at the end. But all year long, man, the run defense was just, you could see the defensive lineman truly playing the run, so.
We talked about how difficult it is to be good at both, right? I mean, you want to be decent at both, but most defenses are going to, be one tilted slightly towards one extreme or the next, right? Either you got a killer pass rush and your pass defense is not so great, or your run defense suffers, and vice versa. And I think you're right, Clay. I think certainly down the stretch, they found a way to stop the run. They really did.
Yeah, Holmes MD1 says PFF had them 5th in coverage last season, Clay. I'm almost sure of it. And that could be the case, Holmes. I like the PFF grades. When you hear me say someone is a top defense or a top this or a top that, I try to specify, all right, it's top PFF grades, just like he did. But when you talk about EPA and yards allowed, yards per pass play, scoring defense, stuff like that, points per play, that's what I use as the true measurement, the true metric of where a team ends up. So it could have been the case. PFF could have said, hey, they had the five highest coverage grades. But you got to keep in mind, too, with the PFF grades, it's just that. It's grading how the players played. It's not really saying here's where they rank. It's just simply saying, hey, here's how the team graded out in terms of how well they played. When I'm talking about like how a team truly ranks in pass defense, I'm looking at the explosives are nice if you can run down that stat, and it's kind of hard to find because when you get AI to do it, it's all over the joint. But yards per pass play is my true measurement of how effective a pass defense is. That coupled with the takeaways, the interceptions, those are the two most important things, right? In terms of a measurable. So, with other aspects of measuring a defense, yards per carry to me is the ultimate run defense metric. I could care less how many yards a team is giving up per game, because if you turn the ball over 3 times, you give them 3 extra possessions, Tim, and they're winning the entire game. They could average 2 yards a carry and end up, inflating those yards per game, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I think it's impressive, though, if PFF had us 5th in coverage last season, considering the fact that we looked at player grades week to week and they were all in the crapper. You look at some of these PFF rankings for our guys, they weren't really high on a lot of our defenders. And so if we're in the, top 5 discussion in some of those categories, I think it's, a sign of positivity.
Yeah, I agree. Ben Holden says, if all the players keep it up, number 1 defense, ? For me, it's what does number 1 defense mean, right, Ben? Some people would look at it as yardage, right? They would say total yardage, or in my case, yards per play, right?
Some people would say sacks. You need to be number 1 in sacks, Clayton.
We've got to finish. Those cliche, broad, and Ben's not doing this, please.
No,
Ben,
not at all. Yeah. We're not picking on Ben.
No, it's just how people they'll grab these little nuggets, these little sayings that they'll hear their favorite podcasters say, and they'll just run with that. And it's like, what the hell does that even mean? But in terms of number 1 defense, like the way I would look at it is, no one's ever going to be able to convince me that there's any stat more important, both offensively and defensively, than points scored and points allowed. I'm sorry. It's just not. And when people argue that with me, I always come back and go, okay, great. So at the end of a game, when they're tallying up who wins or not, they're looking at who had the most yards. No, they're looking at the points.
At the points, yeah. What's the offense's job? Put points on the board. Right. What's the defense's job? Don't give up points.
And the reason there's so much conviction in my voice when I say that is because at the end of the day, if you were to ask a fan, all right, man, you can choose one or the other. Which would you rather have? Your team, having 1,000 yards of total offense, but less points, or more points and, 200 yards of total offense, right?
Maybe we should ask this guy. He might know.
Exactly. And it's any fan that says, oh, give me the yards. Okay, we are going to have to respectfully disagree. So to me, that's why I'm constantly looking at, hey, it's about points scored and points allowed. Now, when you break that down, how do they get to that point? A lot of times turnovers come into play, right, on both sides of the ball. And then you get into yards per play. And then you can break it down even further into rushing yards per carry, yards per rush attempt, or yards per pass attempt. So that's kind of how I like to look at it there. So, but again, Andy Monday, thank you for that comment. All right, next, Chris N says, has Ed Policy said whether he's going to keep the reporting structure the same with both Goot and Matt LaFleur reporting directly to him, or back to the more common Matt LaFleur reporting to Goot, who then reports to Policy? I imagine they're going to keep it the same. Yeah. And the reason they switched to that is because they did a study in the most successful organizations in Green Bay Packers, not in Green Bay Packers history, but in across the current league. that was the structure that was in place. Okay, was kind of going to, running it through an owner, a CEO, but everybody reporting to them as opposed to one person reporting to the general manager. So I personally like the way this is ran because it removes a lot of the negativity. It removes what they refer to as the silos. And what I mean by that, guys, is like the big fallout with the Mike McCarthy era was there was numerous occasions he would get to a presser and the media would ask him about a player that they had signed or this or that, and he didn't even know they had signed him yet because he was not in communication with Ted Thompson. Ted Thompson wasn't going to Mike McCarthy and going, hey, what do you think about this? And that was the old way of thinking, like Ron Wolf was, hey, now I'm not saying they don't communicate somewhat, but at the end of the day, it was the general manager going, I'm calling the shots. And then back in the day, they would be the ones to make the hires as well. So like, go back to Bob Harlan as the president, right? The president and acting CEO of the Packers. He hired Ron Wolf and said, it's your show. And Ron Wolf went and hired Mike Holmgren, right? And that worked, right? That was great. And then what happened down the stretch? Mike Holmgren wanted to become the general manager.
Yep.
So what's that tell you? Him and Ron Wolf had a falling out. And Mike Holmgren is, well, I can run the whole damn thing. And Ron Wolf, if I remember correctly, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, Ron Wolf was ready to retire. He was ready to hang it up. And it was like he waited 1 year longer. And Mike Holmgren said, all right, flush this. I'm going to go to the Seahawks where they'll let me be general manager as well. And the very next year, Ron Wolf retired. And what happened? They made Mike Sherman the general manager as well as the head coach. Now, you got to think on down the road as this kind of unfolded, okay, and Mike Sherman ended up getting hired. When they named him the general manager, his coaching went down the tubes.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's just too much. And Bob Harlan actually pulled his general manager status from him because he said, Mike, you could tell this is killing you. This is eating you up. Like should be able to find that interview or that video clip. And I think it was in the Packers Legacy documentary you can find on the Packers YouTube channel, which, by the way, a phenomenal documentary. If you could find that section there in the early 2000s when they let Mike Sherman go, he tells that story. Bob Harlan tells that story. So Bob Harlan then, of course, goes out and he hires Ted Thompson. Okay, Ted Thompson comes in. Ted Thompson handpicks Mike McCarthy, and it worked. But the problem is, just like with Mike Holmgren, over a course of time, I don't know if it's ego. I don't know if it's, everybody gets comfortable, but things kind of start to implode, and it gets to the point where they're not even communicating with each other. Because again, it's obvious there were problems between Mike Holmgren and Ron Wolf. Like when you hear Ron Wolf talk about his time with the Packers, I've never heard him badmouth Mike Holmgren, but he always says, I staked my entire career on Brett Favre, and he didn't let me down because he traded that first-round pick for Brett Favre. I can't recall one time that I heard Ron Wolf say, man, Mike Holmgren, he was the reason we did what we did. He's the reason we got where we got. I'm sure he believed that. I'm sure he said it at some point, but you could tell there was a little animosity there. So
you remember that the whole scenario, like you mentioned, him hanging on for another year after Coach Holmgren went to Seattle. That was the infamous Ray Rhodes experiment at head coach, 99 season, I believe. Yep. And it was kind of a lame duck season, I guess, or lame duck kind of head coach. And then we brought Mike Sherman in and gave him the keys, and the rest is history, like you said.
Yeah, and it turned into it started off pretty strong, and then when he took over as general manager, it really did turn into a bit of a disaster. But and then when you get to the Mark Murphy tenure here, it was Mark Murphy comes in after Bob Harlan, which Bob Harlan, what a phenomenal job he did. So Mark Murphy comes in, and Ted Thompson's already in place. Mike McCarthy's already in place. Well, then it gets to the boiling point where they're not on the same page, right? And this is my understanding of the story. You guys may hear it different. If so, let us know in the chat. But it kind of got to the point where it's like, okay, they're not even talking to each other about what, there's no unity there. There's no cohesiveness of here's how we're going to build a championship team. So Mark Murphy said, all right, we're going to tear this thing down. Well, obviously they fired Mike McCarthy because they had a horrible year that they ended up getting blown out by, I think it was the Cardinals at Lambeau Field, if I remember correctly, one of the worst teams in the league. So he fires Mike McCarthy, and then he goes out and he handpicks Brian Gutekunst on, as a general manager. I want to say he picked Goody as the general manager, and then it was the next year that Mike McCarthy got let go. And then that's when Mark Murphy said, hey, guys, here's what we're going to do. Both of you are going to report to me, and we're going to have a weekly meeting where we sit down and talk about the vision of the team. Guys, I don't understand anyone who would disagree with that thought process.
Right.
To be able to bounce ideas off of 3 different people, and one being Mark Murphy, who was a former NFL player, right? We talked about him, leading the league in interceptions. I think he's a Super Bowl champion as well, if I remember correctly, or the championship that year that was a strike shortened year or whatever. But you had a former player, and then you have Brian Gutekunst, who, by the way, Tim, he's been, if I understood correctly, Brian Gutekunst has been with the organization for 30 years. 30.
I believe that's true.
It was like, I know it was at least 20. When I heard 30, I went, no way. Are you serious? But he started as a young scout and came up through the system. And obviously Mark Murphy made that hire, right? He hired Brian Gutekunst. And I remember him talking.
Goody joined the Packers in 1999 as a scout.
Yeah, so that's 26 years. Is that what that would be? Am I thinking right? Or is that?
Yep, 26 years.
26 years. Wow. So he goes through and handpicks Brian Gutekunst by looking at scouting reports. He said, I want everybody to bring me your scouting reports, because they wanted to keep things scout-centric in terms of the general manager. I personally like that. I think that's great.
Yep. That's why I think it was such a smooth transition from the Ted Thompson era to the Goody era, honestly, because Goody was in the wings. He was a Ted Thompson understudy. We all know that story. And obviously, Mark Murphy made the right decision there, bringing him up when Ted stepped down. So what a class act to for our organization to handle that whole situation.
Oh, yeah.
Rest in peace to Ted Thompson, and him still having a role with the team, although not as much of an active role all the way up until he ultimately walked away from the game. Health problems and stuff like that. So I think it was just great planning on our organization's part. And important to remember, Ed Posse was there many of them years as well. Throughout that process. So
I want to say Ed Policy has been here for 12 years now. I think that was the number I heard. You guys double check me on that. But and here's the thing too. Mark Murphy goes and hires Brian Gutekunst, and people think that Brian Gutekunst hired Matt LaFleur. He did not. Mark Murphy did. So Mark Murphy brung those two in, and it's all right. You guys are going to report to me. And Murphy caught some hell over it. And I don't understand why, other than people just don't personally like Mark Murphy. And that's, who am I to say they're right or wrong there? So there you go. Bates coming in here since 2012. Okay, so that was a 12 number I heard. So that's 13 years. Wow. So going on 13 years for Ed Policy. Appreciate that, Bates. Absolutely awesome. And he says VP and General Counsel 2012 through 18, COO and General Counsel from 2018 to 2025, and now obviously the new president stepping in. So pretty cool. So let's dive into a little Ed Policy. I put a little article together here, Tim, and I'm going to do just some speed reading. I thought this was cool. Rob Domofsky, Jason Wilde, there's a bunch of people that's been kind of throwing out awesome articles about this. I think Wilde did one too. If not, he'd mentioned it on his show, and he probably plugged Domofsky's article in that regard. But what I did was had the AI go through and, hey, grab the information on the latest that we have on Ed Policy in this hire. So this is just a quick little write-up. It's nothing fancy, but I'm just going to speed read through it. And it was reporting by Rob Domofsky contributed to this story. All right, as the Green Bay Packers, the NFL's only publicly owned franchise, gear up for a historical leadership change. A new chapter is unfolding. On July 25th, Ed Policy will assume the role of president and CEO, succeeding Mark Murphy, who is retiring at the age of 70 per the team's bylaws. According to reporting by ESPN's Rob Demovsky, Policy's transition into this unique role, overseeing the franchise owned by 538,967 shareholders.
That's me and you, right, Clay? We're on that list.
Hey, that's me, man. I got that piece of paper. Comes with high expectations, particularly regarding his management of head coach Matt LaFleur and general manager Brian Gutekunst as the Packers chase another Super Bowl.
Can we talk about Ed Policy's sunglasses game real quick? Just scroll up to that. Look at that photo.
It's pretty clean.
Ray-Bans on point. I love it.
Yeah. That's cleaner than the health department right there, Tim. Look at that. A new era begins. Policy, who's 54 years old, was unanimously selected. I repeat, he was unanimously selected by the Packers board in June of 2024 after a search that considered over 90 candidates. The son of former San Francisco 49ers and Cleveland Browns president Carmen Policy, he brings a deep football lineage and 13 years of experience with the Packers. Since joining in 2012 as general counsel, he rose to chief operating officer, COO, as Bates mentioned, in 2018, spearheading projects like the Titletown District, a community and entertainment hub near Lambeau Field. His prior roles include commissioner of the Arena Football League and NFL executive consultant. So he was raised around this business. He ran his own league in the Arena Football League, and it was also a consultant, executive consultant. As president, Policy will lead the Packers' 7-member executive committee, balancing the demands of a fan-owned team with the goal of delivering championships. Quote, our focus is winning titles, keeping the Packers in Green Bay, and strengthening our community. Policy said in a press conference covered by Demovsky, with Murphy's 17-year tenure marked by a 2011 Super Bowl and 186 wins, 104 losses, and 2-tie record. Setting a high bar, Policy is poised to carve his own legacy. I want to talk about a comment that was made there by Policy because it got really, really blown up, all right? Here's what the part that got blown up. Keeping the Packers in Green Bay. People heard that and went, whoa, wait a minute. You mean I heard ESPN Milwaukee saying that could the Packers leave Green Bay?
Shut up.
Yeah, let me explain to you, and I'm not going to go into great detail, but the reason he made that comment, that is called leverage. That is called negotiating power. The city of Green Bay and the Green Bay Packers have butted heads a little bit on the cost of using the stadium. And I don't want to get too hard into this because I know people get passionate on this topic, and I would rather just keep my opinion on the sideline. But him saying that, just going, hey, my goal is to keep them here in Green Bay, is to send a shot across the bow to the city of Green Bay like, hey, listen, stop trying to push so hard. That's the way I took it, Tim. I could be wrong. So they're not leaving Green Bay, and there's so much I want to say right now, but I do not want
left on the lease, by the way, also. This is not going to happen immediately.
There's what? How many years, Tim?
I don't quote me, but I know it's more than a few.
Yeah, it was something crazy. I remember, but they also said that they could opt out at any moment, and that was like, oh no. Again, this is everything's going to be fine. They are not leaving Green Bay.
Absolutely not.
That way. All right, moving along. The contract conundrum. So ESPN Rob Demovsky provided key insights into the following personnel dynamics. A critical challenge awaits Policy navigating the contract situations of LaFleur and Gutekunst and Russ Ball, the executive vice president of football operations. All three signed extensions in 2022 with 2 years remaining as of 2025. Unlike Murphy, who proactively extended his key leaders, Policy is opting for patience. Demovsky reported Policy's reluctance to let a coach or GM enter the final year of their deal, citing potential issues with staff hiring and team stability. Quote, I'm generally not in favor of a lame duck season, but will assess after 2025, Policy told reporters. This approach puts LaFleur and Gutekunst on notice, with their performance next season likely shaping their futures in Green Bay. So, again, people took that like, whoa, are they on the hot seat? No, I don't think so at all. And, again, you want to get that deal done because if you're going to have coaches stay in Green Bay, if they get another offer and they think their boss is on shaky ground, then they may want to leave while their stock's high, they being the assistants, and it's going to be harder to hire assistants in as you lose assistants as well, right? Yep. So that's why I think that is so important and mentioned there for sure. So here we go. Bates coming in with some hard-hitting facts. The current lease for Lambeau Field expires in August of 2032, leaving 7 years remaining as of June 21st, 2025. 5. I want to say there's an opt-out in there somewhere too, Bates, but I could be wrong. But yeah, that sounds about right, though. So 7 years.
There's a couple. I think Bates had another comment down there.
The Green Bay Packers have 5 2-year options. There you go, to extend the lease, which could potentially extend it until 2042 if all options are exercised. Thank you for that, Bates. Appreciate the information, everybody. All right, LaFleur and Gutekunst, proven but hungry for more. Matt LaFleur, hired in 2019, has a 67-33 regular season record. That's a 670 winning percentage, ranking 3rd among active NFL coaches. His tenure includes 5 playoff appearances in 6 years and NFC championship game runs in 2020 and 2021, though a Super Bowl berth remains elusive. The 2024 wildcard loss to the Philadelphia Eagles intensifies scrutiny on whether LaFleur can elevate the Packers further. In terms of Brian Gutekunst, general manager since 2018, he's reshaped the roster with bold moves like drafting Jordan Love in 2020 and trading Aaron Rodgers in 2023. His focus on youth paid off with consecutive playoff appearances in 23 and 24, and the 24 defense featuring draft picks like linebackers Edgerrin Cooper and Tyron Hopper. I don't know why I mentioned Tyron Hopper. That was pretty funny. Ranked 5th in yards allowed, the best since 2010. Still, the lack of a championship since 2011 looms large. Policy, per Domofsky reporting, views both as, quote, exceptional leaders, but will evaluate LaFleur on results and team culture and Gutekunst on roster decisions in alignment with the coaching staff. Quote, it's about people pulling in the same direction, Policy said. That's what drives success. So I think, to go back to Chris N's original question in the Patreon group, Tim, that quote right there, it's about pulling people in the same direction. Why would they change the structure in terms of all 3 meeting together? You know what I mean? Or all 4, yep, because Russ Ball is included in that as well.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
All right, so moving along, maintaining or evolving the structure. Since 2018, the Packers structure has had LaFleur, Gutekunst, and Ball report directly to the president, a shift from the prior model where the GM held more authority. This setup allowed Gutekunst, a first-time GM, to focus on roster building while collaborating with LaFleur. Policy indicated he's open to keeping this framework, but won't hesitate to adjust if it boosts the team's chances of winning. Quote, I'm not tied to any one structure, he told Domofsky. If a change helps us win, we'll make it. High stakes in 2025 season with a young roster and rising quarterback in Jordan Love. The Packers are primed for a strong 2025. Policy's decision to delay the contract extensions, as Domofsky noted, makes the upcoming season a proving ground for LaFleur and Gutekunst. A deep playoff run or Super Bowl appearance could secure their roles, while a disappointing year might spark changes. Social media buzz on X and analysis from outlets like Sports Illustrated suggested LaFleur is, quote, on the hot seat, but Policy's measured tone reflects confidence tempered by accountability. We're in a great spot, but we're not here to settle, he said. Here's his vision for Green Bay. Beyond the gridiron, Policy is dedicated to preserving the Packers' unique identity. His work on Titletown underscores his commitment to Green Bay's community, a priority he emphasized to Domofsky. Quote, this franchise is special because of its fans and history, Policy said. We have to honor that while pushing for greatness. As he prepares to take over, Policy has been shadowing Murphy, leading meetings, and representing the Packers at NFL events. Murphy, who recently shared regrets on the team's website about not winning a Super Bowl with LaFleur and Gutekunst, leaves a formidable legacy. Policy, however, is ready to lead. Rob Domofsky reporting was instrumental in shaping this article, providing critical details on Policy's transition and strategic priorities. Quote, I've learned from Mark, but I'm here to forge my own path, Policy told Domofsky. Our goal is clear. Bring the Lombardi Trophy back to Green Bay and ensure the Packers thrive for generations.
Let's go.
I'm digging it, Tim. I don't know about you, man, but I think Ed Policy is going to do a hell of a job, man. And the thing that makes me so confident in that is knowing that he's got to study under Mark Murphy for these last however many years, what we say 13 years, because Murphy's done it right. And people don't give Murphy credit. Murphy won a Super Bowl, guys. He won a Super Bowl. Like, he was the president and CEO when they won the Super Bowl. And, you know, Bob Harlan won one in the 90s, right? 96. He was the acting CEO then. So, yeah. And as Holmes said there, and his father, right? So, see what Solder said. I just need policy to stay the hell out of the football side of the operation. There you go. And that's the thing that Murphy really never got involved with. I've heard people say that he's tried to, get his hands in. And I always say, give me an example. And there's never an example.
There's never anything there. Yeah. Like a good executive, right? Stay the hell out of the football operation side. Be a good executive. Do what you need to do in the front office, but let the football guys do the football stuff, right?
And the reason I'm so confident he will is because he was the one heading up the Titletown.
Yeah.
Project. Like he's focusing on the business aspect and keep that income generating, right? You remember before the draft, Tim, I was like, why don't they open up the bowl for the draft, man?
And we weren't sure. And then lo and behold, it ended up happening. Yep.
Yeah. And I still haven't gotten confirmation either way. I did write an email to the Packers, as silly as that sounds, saying, hey, why don't you guys open up the bowl for away games and let fans watch it on the big screen inside the bowl? Like that's extra revenue. Tim, the amount of concessions that were open for the draft when we were in the bowl, right? Start with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Be a good baseline, right?
Yeah.
Good starting point.
And then you can say, okay, is that, did we run out of food? Did we run out of, stuff? I mean, do you see the pro shop, Tim, how packed it was with people? Yep. Like there are people that can't get season tickets. Obviously, there's a bunch of us. They can't afford to go to a Packers game, but imagine going up and paying $10 to come in the stadium and watch an away game and take in the Lambeau, just environment, the vibe. Now, here's the thing: there may be a rule against that in league wide. I don't know if there is or not. There could be a rule that, hey, look, you're not allowed to open your stadium for when your team's out of town on the road, because it may take away from your fans going to that away game. It may take away from the TV ratings, things like that. So there may be some kind of, collectively bargained agreement amongst the owners, if that makes sense. So I think that would be really, really cool if they could do that. So
that'd be awesome.
Yeah. And if it does have something to do with like what we were talking about contractually, whether it was with the contracts or just other teams wanting the majority of that fan base to be able to travel to those games, then why not try to get it changed?
Clayton, I'll make sure I bring this up at the shareholders meeting, July 25th.
Walk down there on the field.
As soon as Ed Posse puts his right hand on the Bible, right, and is officially sworn in as the president and CEO, we'll make sure that's the first order of business,
Tim's like, I got something to say, guys. He's going to walk down the stands, hop the fence. Security guard's going to tackle him.
Yeah, I was going to say, see how many questions I can get out before I'm escorted out of the premise by security, right?
I love it, dude.
No, but super excited for Ed Posse. I think we should mention, right, Clayton, a Notre Dame guy. We're Notre Dame fans. He got his bachelor's at Notre Dame down there in South Bend, before going to Stanford for law and all that stuff. So do a little bit of reading up on Ed Policy, and you'll see very quickly that the Packers are in great hands here going forward.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man.